to Readings by Meinel. I am reading Ships, my very first novel. Chapter 32. The day of Joan and Grace's wedding was simply beautiful. As most days in Hawaii were paradise, this one wouldn't disappoint. Joan kept her early morning tanning appointment, and the 2 sessions had produced minor results. She lost some of the pasty look that she had acquired on tour. She also had them clean her pores and exfoliate them. Refreshed, she sat in the steam room for a while and then had a massage. She arrived back at the suite to find Brian nervously pacing there. She wasn't late, she still had a couple of hours. Evidently, he had been sent by Grace to check on her, and when she couldn't be found, it had caused panic in the ranks. Laughing it off, she gave him a package to give to Grace and sent him back to her. She went to bathe, and there came a knock on her door. The hairdresser she had hired was there. Sitting there in her robe, they unbraided her many braids together. The hairdresser waited while Joan took a long hot bath and washed her hair. It was the first time in over 4 years that she had seen it loose, and it took some getting used to. The hairdresser brushed out its length. With the braids in, she had known it was long, but the braided lengths pulled them up and together. Unbraided, her hair fell to mid-thigh. The hairdresser exclaimed over its red-brown color and length. Joan was lucky. Hereditary had blessed her with no gray hairs as of yet. Grace kept her blonde hair colored the same blonde over the years, and no one could tell if she was hiding gray hair. The hairdresser helped her dress and again brushed out the hair. She rubbed it until it shone. Covering up her dress, Joan applied her makeup and jewelry and applied her perfume carefully so as not to stain her dress. Slipping on her heels, she was ready, and none too soon, as a knock at the door attested. The hairdresser let herself out as she let Craig in. Joan came out of the bedroom and he stopped in his tracks. He too had gotten used to her braids, and the sight that greeted him overwhelmed him. This stunning woman was his mother? Smiling broadly, he told her how beautiful she looked. Blinking back tears, she thanked him. Going to her room safe, she took out the ring that she had ordered last from the jeweler. Handing it to Craig, she warned him not to lose it. Laughing, he told her she should have warned Aaron, who would be carrying it down the aisle for her. He escorted her down a private elevator and hid her on one side of the chapel, where the ceremony would be performed. She stood there nervously, trying not to faint from it all. Her heart was beating so hard she could hear it. In a few minutes she would go out there and marry the woman she loved. Grace had awoken early despite the party of the previous evening. She felt so good this morning that she was sure everything would go smoothly. Promptly at 8, the wedding planner arrived to help with the last-minute details. Grace had already bathed and shaved. No nicks to bleed all over her gown or to jinx things. She applied her makeup carefully today. She brushed her hair out until every lock was in place. Her careful coloring over the years made it look natural and soft. It framed her face beautifully. She sat there in her robe talking to the wedding planner. Brian stopped by to eat breakfast with her. She asked him to check on his mother, and when she couldn't be found, she became frantic. Suppose she had passed out from exhaustion or dehydration. She phoned the local hospital to find out if Joan was admitted there or a woman of her description, only to be told no. Grace spent a very worrisome time until Brian returned with a package from his mother. She had returned to her suite and was getting ready. Annoyed, Grace calmed herself to open the package from Joan. How sweet, a wedding gift. Opening it, she found a large jewelry box that contained a pendant, earrings, a bracelet, and even an anklet. All of it matched her ring with the slender hands. The sapphires sparkled in their settings. It was a very expensive and incredible set. Grace was overwhelmed. A note was inside the lid. Pulling it out, Grace read, "Something old, an old design. Something new, made just for you. Something borrowed, well, that's up to you. Something blue, they are real sapphires. I love you, Joan." She showed the note and the jewelry to Brian, who helped her on with it all. He was adept at the necklace and bracelet, but the earrings and anklet he let her do. She started to tear up when she saw them in the mirror. Brian warned her that she'd ruin her makeup and handed her a sapphire blue silk handkerchief to borrow. Such thoughtful gifts, so much work had gone into them. She touched her necklace and thought about Joan. She'd be married to her in about a half an hour. She went to get dressed, and the planner helped her on with her dress, careful not to smudge it with makeup. She carefully dabbed on her perfume. Freshening her lipstick, she was ready. A last-minute touch to her hair, and they left. She had to run back for the ring she was giving Joan. She had almost forgotten it. Brian escorted her to the chapel and put her in the room opposite the one his mother stood in. He took the ring to tie it to the pillow that Aaron would carry. The chapel was already full of family and friends. Signaling the organist, he walked to his place. At the music, both doors opened to the rooms on either side of the altar. The minister stood there waiting for the brides. Joan came out of the left side one, and Grace was on the right. Looking straight into each other's eyes, they met in the middle. Aaron stepped up to where they stood facing each other, holding the rings on a velvet pillow. He had done this for his Uncle Adam earlier this year and knew what to do. Craig, Adam, and Brian stood across the main aisle. The chapel was small and the aisle not so wide. They were an impressive wall of men. Joan was thrilled to see Grace walking towards her from her room. She looked beautiful. She had chosen a lacy cream-colored gown of layers that flowed about her, making her look angelic. It reminded Joan of something she had seen once in an old movie about a harem girl, but it didn't have that sleaziness. Joan wondered, though, if she had removed all those flowing lacy scarves, what she would find underneath. The scarves crossed in front in a deep V. They covered her shoulders and V'd down over them to her elbows and a little below. It flowed halfway down her calves, and her long legs looked incredible. Joan caught a flash of blue on her ankle. She'd worn all the jewelry. Her elfin grin was fixed on her face and threatening to explode into a toothy smile. She finally stopped fighting it and smiled beautifully at Joan. She looked into Joan's admiring eyes as she came up, and she met her in the middle. Grace was sure her heart would cause an attack before the wedding had even started. When she heard the music start, it was their signal to go out there and meet. When she caught her first sight of Joan, she was sure her heart stopped for a moment. Joan had chosen to wear her hair loose. Not since she had first met Joan had she seen it loose. It was gorgeous, flowing down her back, her butt below to her thighs. Its color sparkled in the sun pouring through the colored-leaded glass of the chapel. Joan had chosen to wear a silk off-white gown that made her appear taller than she was. It was a simple cut, but so elegant and sophisticated. As Joan walked towards Grace, it was sexy beyond measure. It crossed in front over her breasts and made her waist look incredibly tiny. Her broad shoulders carried it very well without padding. It came to mid-calf, and her heels made her even taller. The two of them complemented each other admirably. No one realized that they hadn't coordinated their finery. They matched beautifully. Joan with her red-brown hair loose, Grace with her blonde good looks. Many people that they had invited caught their breath as the two met in the middle. The minister asked that they hold hands as he began the ceremony. Grace mouthed the words, "Your hair," letting Joan know how much she liked it. Joan mouthed back, "Your jewelry." Her eyes took in the earrings, the pendant. Her fingers could feel the ring. She didn't want to lose eye contact with Grace, so she could see the bracelet or the anklet. Grace drank in the details of how Joan looked at this moment, and their photographer captured it all on film. The minister who asked, "Who giveth this woman?" meaning Joan, and the guys answered in unison, "We do." Joan broke eye contact to look at her sons in amusement. They didn't sit down. The minister asked, "Who giveth this woman?" meaning Grace, and the guys again answered in unison, "We do." Tears sprang to both women's eyes. Joan looked again at her sons in gratitude, and they sat down smiling cheekily. She glanced down at the ring bearer and met the eyes of her grandson. He smiled and exchanged a wink with her. He'd been working on that wink for a while now, ever since Grace had taught him it. The ceremony continued, and it came time to exchange the rings. The minister leaned over to bless the rings that Aaron held up. He untied the ties that bound the rings to the pillow. The minister had Grace take her ring first to place it on Joan's hand. Removing her engagement ring so Grace could slide the wedding band on closer to her heart, Joan smiled as Grace repeated after the minister. I, Grace Monroe, take thee, Joan Woods, as my lawfully wedded wife, to have and to hold, in sickness and in health, until death parts us. This ring is a symbol of that eternal bond, never ending. She pushed the ring onto her finger. Joan pushed her engagement ring in behind it. Then it was Joan's turn. Grace removed her engagement ring, and Joan took the wedding band from the preferred velvet pillow. Looking down again at her grandson, they exchanged a smile as Aaron said, "Here you go, Grandma." People laughed around the chapel as his clear voice rang out. No one had had trouble hearing him or Grace in the small chapel. The minister said, "Repeat after me," and Joan did. I, Joan Woods, take thee, Grace Monroe, as my lawfully wedded wife, to have and to hold, in sickness and in health, until death parts us. This ring is a symbol of that eternal bond, never ending. She didn't push it on Grace's finger, though. Grace had listened to Joan's vows, looking down at the ring. Joan waited a moment, and Grace looked up as Joan continued. In the olden days, a ring was given that had meaning. This ring that I give you spells out in stones what you mean to me. The first stone is a diamond, the second an emerald, the third an amethyst, the fourth a ruby, the fifth another emerald, the sixth a sapphire, and finally the seventh a topaz. If you take the first letter of each of these stones, you will find it spells dearest. With that, Joan pulled Grace's hand to her heart and said, "Because that is what you are to me, my dearest love." Then she carefully pushed the ring on Grace's finger. Dumbstruck, Grace stood there looking at the ring. Finally, remembering her part, she put it fit perfectly with her wedding band, which had a notch in it that allowed the flowing hands to hold the sapphire and nest it into the second ring. The minister and the assembled congregation were all touched by Joan's speech to Grace. Joan's eyes had never left Grace's as she told her the meaning of the ring. Tears sprang to Grace's eyes, and she tried desperately to stop them with her silk handkerchief that Brian had lent her. No one assembled had heard of the kind of ring that Joan had given Grace. The minister, after a lengthy pause, continued the service and pronounced them partners for life. Ladies and gentlemen, I give you two committed and admirable women, Mrs. Joan Woods and Mrs. Grace Monroe. Ladies, you may kiss your bride. Both of them looked startled to be addressed as Mrs., but then exchanged a grin as he continued. For the first time, everyone saw them exchange a kiss. Many felt squeamish about it, but after all, they were at a lesbian wedding. What could one expect? Joan and Grace turned to the assembled congregation, and the boys started to clap and cheer. Everyone took the opportunity to come forward and wish them well. This ends my reading of Ships. I hope you have enjoyed the section I chose to read for you, and I do hope you've read the book.